A third grade teacher is now facing 55 charges for allegedly assaulting multiple elementary school students. How could this happen, and what exactly could he now be facing? We break down this disturbing story with Alyssa, an expert on how predators target kids. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Yep, well, Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google users' privacy issues surrounding Google Incognito. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. 44-year-old Matthew Schlegel, reportedly married with 2 kids, former elementary school teacher out of Anne Arundel County in Maryland, apparently been working for the public school system since 2008, teaching at Savannah Park Elementary School since 2016. He has been arrested and charged with 55 crimes related to allegedly sexually assaulting multiple students between 2022 and 2024. Yeah, got another one on our hands. Another one that we're talking about here on Sidebar. Now, in the application for statement of charges that was filed with the District Court of Maryland, it states how back in March of 2024, police opened up an investigation involving Schlegel and female students at Savannah Park Elementary School. He was removed from the school on March 15th, and Child Protective Services conducted at least 8 forensic interviews of elementary school students. And before we get into this, I have to warn you, trigger warning, this is incredibly disturbing to hear. And we're not going to go into all of the graphic details. Having said that, we do have to relay to you what the allegations are here. Because this is, while it's incredibly disturbing, it is so serious. So a third grader identified Schlegel, who was apparently her math teacher, and explained in her forensic interview that this man started touching her in January of 2024 and touched her, quote, girl parts. He allegedly would do this by coming to her desk, crouching next to her, and putting his hand underneath her shorts. They asked that he be charged with sexual abuse of a minor, 4th-degree sex offense of a person in position of authority, and 2nd-degree assault. Another student said that Schlegel touched her private area both over and under her clothes while in class. This allegedly happened on more than one occasion, beginning in October of 2023 and ending in March of 2024. There's a request that he be charged there with sex abuse of a minor, 3rd-degree sex offense, 4th-degree sex offense of a person in position of authority, and 2nd-degree assault. This for allegedly touching her private parts. Then also 3rd and 4th-degree sex offense for a person in position of authority, and 2nd-degree assault for allegedly touching her backside. Then we have another disturbing account. A child explained in her forensic interview when she was in 3rd grade, that's what we're talking about here, 3rd grade, she sat on Schlegel's lap and he would allegedly stroke the inside and outside of her thighs. Another child claimed that Schlegel put his hand down the back of her pants but over her underwear during class, that he would rub, that he would also place his hand underneath her shirt too. Then we have 2 students, one current and another former 3rd grade students of Schlegel, who accused him of touching them with a pencil underneath their shorts. And there's more in this document from other forensic interviews that we don't need to discuss. We don't need to get into more, but you get the idea of these allegations. Now, towards the end of this document, it says, quote, during the investigations, numerous witnesses were interviewed. Independent witnesses stated that they observed the victims on Schlegel's lap during class, while another witness claimed they actually saw Schlegel inappropriately touch one of the victims. To talk about this, let me bring in licensed clinical social worker Anna Sonata, who wrote the book Duck, Duck, Groom, Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target. Anna, thanks for coming on. Is this something you've never heard before, or is this unfortunately something you've seen way too often?
Jesse, thank you so much for having me and the opportunity to talk about this very important subject. This is a pattern of behavior that we see again and again. And what I hope we can cover this morning is the patterns of grooming so that your audience can make themselves a little bit more prepared to protect their own families and children.
Talk to me about that. These allegations that I laid out happened over a period of time, allegedly concerning multiple students. There seemed to be a consistent pattern of abuse based on these allegations. What do you take away from it?
There's a pattern in just the victims that he's selected. He's selected young girls between the ages of probably 8 to 10, and we know that he was in the school system from the early 2000s. So I don't think we've seen the full extent of the victims and potential survivors that are involved in this case. One thing I want your audience to know is that grooming is a perverse form of courtship. So what do I mean by that? Courtship, which hopefully all of us have had the opportunity to experience, is the idea of wooing somebody in order to spend time and be in available spaces with them. So when predators groom, they typically start off very sweet because courtship is sweet. These are not aggressive moves. These are very flattering, kind moves. So this is showering the child with attention, showering them with compliments. Oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you're so nice. Oh, you're my favorite student, things of that nature. So it is very easy for a child, especially, which is why they target children, because they're exceptionally vulnerable, for a child to be caught up in that sensation of, I'm special, somebody cares about me. And this teacher was highly skilled at putting himself in a position over and over and over again with these young minors to be somebody important in their lives.
And how confusing it must be for them, thinking their teacher, a position of authority, somebody they should be listening to, is doing this or allegedly doing this. And the thing that struck me was how blatant it was, right? So happening in open class like this. And I mentioned before how there's corroborating witnesses seemingly talking about what they observed. Do you usually see it like this? Because a lot of the cases that we cover about educators who are abusing minors, it happens in their car, happens at their home, happens after class. But in this open environment like that is just even more chilling.
I'm really glad you brought that up because one of the principles that I teach families to look out for is the idea that predators run on gas. That's grooming, access, and space. And what do teachers have? They have access and space. So he was using his classroom extremely brazen in front of other kids, in front of other individuals. You know, think about a child's classroom nowadays. They've typically got at least a door, possibly some windows. There are access points for visibility.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really catches my attention in this case is this has to have been an ongoing pattern because he was doing it in the classroom in front of other children. So his confidence to abuse children in plain sight was extremely strong. And that is noteworthy as we move forward and as we ask other families to come forward who may have been his students in the past.
Without getting too graphic, as you talk about this escalation, and it's actually making me nauseous to ask this question, are you suggesting that this was a way, you know, to get them comfortable to abuse them even worse than they were allegedly abused? You know what I'm saying? And we've seen this before where maybe it starts at a young age, but as they get older or even the same age, this assault can you understand what I'm saying, right? It can get even worse than what the allegations are. It's a way to escalate this even further.
Absolutely, Jesse. Predators typically start with little touches, you know, and you even described in your opening about he would touch children with inanimate objects like the pencil. So these are serial predators. These are serial individuals. Most people don't realize that a typical predator, 70%, has up to 9 victims. So this individual, this teacher, placed himself in an environment filled with children, available victims. He then selected which children he would target to abuse. It wasn't all the girls in the class, but it was a hand-picked group, which unfortunately led to him feeling more and more confident to escalate the touches. So what do I mean by that? I mean, instead of maybe over the clothes, you would get to under the outer layer of clothing. And we have no idea the full extent actually of what occurred in this situation, because in one of the documents I read, it stated that he had individual time with these children, several of these children outside of school. They don't illuminate what that is. Did he take them to his home? Could he possibly have taken them off campus somewhere under the guise of being a caring teacher? This is something that all families need to keep a lookout for, because teachers are perfectly positioned because they do have that access and space. And by far, the majority of teachers who work in school settings are caring and want the best for children. However, these predators can find their way inside the school walls.
If he really did all this, married with kids, why do they do it? Is this, in your experience, why do we see this happen? It's a completely double life. He was a very popular teacher, again, married with children. Why do we see this behavior? Why do we see predators doing this?
So you've asked the $1 million question, Jesse. Everyone wants to get to the bottom of what makes a predator a predator. Unfortunately, answering that question doesn't make our kids any safer. And what we have to keep in mind is that the biopsychosocial considerations that have been identified so far are in the predator's childhood are things like domestic violence, instability in the home, possibly a high ACE score. That ACE stands for adverse childhood experiences that the CDC has researched heavily, which indicates things like bankruptcy, incarceration of a parent, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and overall instability, as well as domestic violence. Now, you and I are influential, but we don't have the power to go into every house across America and beyond to eliminate those things from households. So what we have to focus on instead is less about what makes predators predators, and instead focus our attention into how do they prey? How are they getting access to kids? And what do we do? Because you mean to tell me there was no indicator in this case with 8 victims and soon to be more coming out in this trial process, that people didn't recognize a pattern of behavior, they didn't watch something, they didn't get a gut check that said, this is a little weird. Why is he giving candy to these certain kids? Why does he have to go to the specific desks of these certain children? You mean to tell me no other kids were around in that environment to possibly notice something? I think there's more here.
It can be confusing. It can be confusing as to what's happening. And that brings me to my next point. These are allegations. At this point, he is innocent until proven guilty. And we'll talk a little bit more about the charges in a second. But a lot of this is coming from these minor victims. And in these forensic interviews, how tough are those interviews? How tough is it to get this information from these young children?
Off to the clinical team who conducts these interviews and to the families of these children. This is extremely challenging emotional work to have to go through some of the worst events that these kids have ever experienced, and to do it in a public environment with potentially a stranger that you've never met before. Oftentimes they're recorded. These clinicians, though, are highly skilled and trained who do forensic interviewing. So especially with minors of this elementary age, they will use things like stuffed animals and toys, and they're extremely gentle in their approach. However, I commend not only these survivors, but also their parents for facilitating the communication and the information so we can get this predator out of the school system.
Let me talk a little bit about the charges here. So he was hit with 36 charges, including multiple counts of child sexual abuse and 4th-degree sexual offense. But then he was hit with more charges for each alleged crime. So 11 counts of child sexual abuse, 18 counts of 4th-degree sex offense. My understanding, not only are these incredibly serious charges, these are felonies, with some carrying 25 years in prison or even 10 years in prison. And some are based on the idea that he was in a position of authority. Now, if he is convicted on all of these charges, this could very well be a situation where each one runs either concurrently together or consecutively. So in other words, I'm sure it's a possibility he could be looking at spending the rest of his life in prison. But Anna, I ask you this question, putting the legal question of if he's going to be convicted or he pleads guilty. Do you think that this is a situation, if these allegations are true, and in your experience, he should ever be released back into society? Or is prison where he deserves to belong for the rest of his life if he really did these things?
Well, first and foremost, the survivors in this case need justice. So the fact that he's facing penalties inside a courtroom is the first step. However, the focus really needs to be on the healing of these families and the additional children who are going to come forward in this process. Typically, predators who serve time and are released have about a 5 to 20% recidivism rate. So for your audience, the recidivism rate is the rate at which they will recommit a crime. Now, in my opinion, and I'm sure in yours as well, Jesse, that's too high. Yeah. So whatever we have done or are doing within the justice system, it is not preventing recidivism. If individuals were coming out of the prison system and there was a 0% recidivism rate, then I would say, well, we have some room here for rehabilitation and behavior management, etc. But we don't have that according to statistics.
Yeah, and when you look at alleged predators or convicted predators where there's multiple victims, the age of the victims, this could be a situation where he could be spending the rest of his life in prison. And it's difficult to defend against because you would basically be in the position of trying to say that these children are not telling the truth. And he'd have a right to defend himself and put the prosecution, hold them to their burden. But it's tough. It'd be really tough for him. Now, I did think that this was interesting, and I wanted your perspective on it. So the court denied Schlegel's request for house arrest with his parents. He's currently being held without bail in the Jennifer Road Detention Center. And this was despite the fact that his attorney had argued that Schlegel wasn't a flight risk because he apparently knew for weeks about these claims. He knew that he might get arrested. After all, he was let go in March. But reportedly, more than 30 people, like his family and friends, former students, they came forward, wrote letters to the court talking about his high moral character and how he was a beloved teacher. I was surprised to see that. So in other cases where people would distance themselves, you kind of saw the opposite with him. Are you surprised to see that?
I'm really glad you brought that up. I was struck by that detail. Over 30 people showing up to the hearing. I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that predators are highly skilled, charismatic individuals. Often. So these are individuals who are the teacher of the year. They are the coach of the year. They're putting themselves in positions where they gather all of the support and confidence in other people around them, because when or if an allegation comes out against them, they have a sounding board that says this couldn't possibly be true. Think of every interview you've ever watched of individuals surrounding predators, and they say, oh, it couldn't be. He's the nicest guy. He's the greatest teacher. He's the bedrock of our community. Right. So it's not surprising to me because this is classic predatory behavior. We've got to ingratiate ourselves inside the community, and we have to have their support, especially at times when character is called into question.
So let me leave it on this, where you kind of mentioned it before. There could be more people with information, and child abuse investigators are asking anybody with any information on this case or other cases to call the tip line at 410-222-4733. And you can remain anonymous. If you want to do that, you're encouraged to call the Anne Arundel County Police tip line at 410-222-4700. Anna Sonoda, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate giving your perspective. It's an important topic to talk about, even though it's incredibly disturbing. And thank you for the work that you do on this as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody, that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.